The first time someone tried to steal my lighthouse, I thought it was a joke. The second time, it was a full-blown ambush. It was a Saturday morning, and I was halfway through replacing some rusted bolts on the catwalk railing when I heard tires crunching on gravel 3 SUVs, rolling up my private drive like they owned the place. At the front of the pack was a silver Lexus with a vanity plate that read, Roulez 1. That should have been my first warning. Out stepped Clorinda Huxley, president of the Bayshore Bluffs Homeowner Association. She was in her usual uniform oversized sunglasses, a pastel cardigan wrapped around her shoulders like she was sailing into war, and the kind of haircut that practically screamed, "Can I speak to your manager?" Behind her trailed the rest of the self-important HOA council, all dressed like they were headed to a country club rather than someone else's property. I wiped my hands on a rag and started heading down the path. "Clorinda, you're trespassing," I said flatly. She didn't even flinch. "Yorick Flint, you know why we're here, other than to harass me on my own land." "No clue." She pointed dramatically up the rocky bluff to my lighthouse, the one my grandfather built with his own hands back in the 50s. "That structure violates HOA regulations. It's not in the community's approved color palette, it's taller than the allotted 30 feet, and it's not listed on the neighborhood's original development plan. It must come down immediately." I blinked. "That lighthouse has been here longer than the HOA has existed. It's older than most of the houses in the bluffs." "Doesn't matter," she snapped. "It wasn't disclosed or approved in the revised community charter. It's unauthorized and obstructs the uniform aesthetic of our shoreline." "You mean it blocks your view?" Her lips tightened. "The HOA has voted. That lighthouse is an eyesore and a violation. We're giving you 72 hours to remove it or we'll do it for you." A man behind her, some wiry guy with a clipboard, muttered, "We've already contacted a contractor." I felt my jaw clench. "That's criminal trespass and you know it." Clorinda raised a hand. "Yorick, don't be difficult. The HOA has jurisdiction. The shoreline is part of the common scenic overlay." I let out a low laugh. "No, it's not," she blinked. "Excuse me," I pointed past them to the edge of my property. "See that rusted anchor chained to the boulder? That's the original survey marker. This land, this bluff, was deeded to my family decades before the HOA was even formed. I've got the charts, the original survey, and the land deeds to prove it. The lighthouse is mine." Clorinda's face flushed a deep red. "Those documents are probably outdated. You'll need to submit them to the HOA Legal Review Board." "I don't answer to your board," I replied. "This isn't HOA land, never has been." She stepped forward, getting uncomfortably close. "Don't be naive, Mr. Flint. The board has ways of acquiring non-compliant parcels. Eminent domain, back taxes, zoning violations, will find something." That was it. I stepped back, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen twice from the lighthouse. A security camera rotated toward us. I'd had it installed last month after someone spray-painted Bluff Hog across my garage door. The whole exchange had been caught on video. "You're being recorded," I said, "so I hope you're proud of the threats you just made. Because when I take this to my attorney and the local zoning board, they're going to have a field day." Clorinda's mouth opened, then snapped shut. I turned and walked back toward the lighthouse, leaving them standing there like a pack of confused vultures. I had a feeling this wasn't over. But I also knew something they didn't. I wasn't just a guy with a lighthouse. I was a guy who came prepared. By Monday morning, the air felt electric with tension. I'd spent most of Sunday digging through my grandfather's old maritime files in the basement, original blueprints, coastal development maps from the county assessor's office, and a dusty envelope containing notarized surveys and a coastal rights agreement signed by the state in 1963. I scanned everything, made 3 copies, and compiled them into a binder thicker than a phone book. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into the county records office downtown. The woman at the front desk glanced up from her screen. "You hear about Bayshore Bluffs?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "That obvious?" She nodded toward the glass doors. "You're the third person this morning. Someone on their board has been filing nuisance claims like they're handing out coupons. One guy said his doghouse was cited for being too rustic." I slid the binder across the counter. "This is about a lighthouse. They're trying to seize it." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't ask questions. She buzzed me through to the zoning and land use department, where a tired-looking man named Vince met me with a clipboard and coffee-stained tie. He led me into a cramped office lined with file cabinets and unwatered plants. "You got copies?" he asked, "originals and digital backups." He pulled a legal pad from a drawer. "Let's see what they've cooked up this time." I laid everything out, the land deed with my grandfather's name, the coastal development permit from the Old Harbor Authority, the state-issued exemption for lighthouse maintenance. Vince flipped through each page, his eyebrows climbing higher. "You're sitting on ironclad property rights," he said. "This bluff predates the HOA by over 30 years. There's nothing in their charter that lets them annex sovereign parcels, no matter what nonsense they're pushing." I leaned back. "They claimed they had jurisdiction through scenic overlay," he snorted. "That overlay was invalidated 5 years ago when the state reclassified this coastline as non-integrated. They must know that," I nodded. "Then why the stunt?" he tapped the binder. "Because they gamble on people not knowing the law. You'd be surprised how many folks fold when they get a strongly worded letter." I left with an official statement of land rights, 2 notarized confirmations from zoning, and a contact number for the State Coastal Commission. That evening, I drafted a cease and desist letter and had it delivered to the HOA office via courier. I made sure it came with a return receipt, and a copy went to the sheriff's department. By Thursday, the retaliation began. That morning, I found a bright orange sticker plastered on my mailbox. "Unapproved structure." It wasn't even my mailbox, it was a weathered oak post with a brass box, built by my father in the 70s. I peeled the sticker off and drove straight to the post office. The clerk behind the counter took one look at the adhesive residue and narrowed his eyes. "That's federal property," he said. "Tampering with a mailbox violates Title 18, Section 1771. HOA did it," I said. He jotted something down. "I'll file a report with the postal inspector. They'll want photos." I handed him the prints I'd taken on my phone. Clear as day, the sticker slapped over the federal identification number. By the time I drove back, there was a white pickup parked outside my gate, engine idling. A man in a neon vest was measuring the width of my driveway with a laser level. He didn't notice me until I stepped out of the truck. "Who sent you?" I asked. He glanced up, startled. "A Bayshore Bluffs HOA. Said they were conducting a compliance survey. On private land, they gave me a map. Let me guess, no property lines on it," he hesitated. "Just roads and structures." I pulled out the laminated survey I'd had made last month and pointed to the spot he was standing. "This is outside their jurisdiction by 74 feet. You're trespassing." He looked pale. "I didn't know. I'll pack up." He bolted so fast he left his measuring tape behind. I tossed it into the garage. That night, I installed a second camera facing the driveway. The next morning, I had a voicemail from a woman claiming to be from the HOA Environmental Review Committee. Her voice was syrupy and rehearsed. "We've received several anonymous complaints that your property may contain invasive plant species. If we do not get a response within 48 hours, a visual inspection will be scheduled." I played the message twice, then forwarded it to my lawyer. That evening, I found a stack of printed flyers jammed into my storm door. In bold red letters, "Unsafe structure, community at risk." Below was a grainy photo of my lighthouse with a big red X over it. At the bottom, "Concerned citizens of Bayshore Bluffs." It was pure propaganda. I took the flyers to the sheriff's substation. The deputy on duty, a woman named Ramirez, took one look and frowned. "They're escalating," she said. "This qualifies as targeted harassment. You said they trespassed already, 3 vehicles. No warrant, no notice." They threatened to demolish the lighthouse. She typed something into her computer. I'll flag the HOA on the community conflict watch list. If they step foot on your land again without a court order, call us. We'll send a unit. The next day, I attended the HOA's monthly open meeting. They held it in a laughably sterile community hall, rows of folding chairs, a plastic podium, and a table with cheese cubes and warm lemonade. Clorinda was already on the mic when I walked in. She froze mid-sentence when she saw me. "I see we have a guest," she said, voice tight. I walked straight to the mic at the front. "Yorick Flint, property owner, I'd like to address the board." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. The wiry man with the clipboard from Saturday, his name tag read Trevor, whispered something to Clorinda. She nodded. "You have 2 minutes." I held up a copy of my land deed. "This document, backed by state and county verification, proves that my lighthouse is on sovereign private land, not subject to your charter, not within your jurisdiction. Yet your board has sent unlicensed surveyors, tampered with federal property, distributed libelous flyers, and threatened demolition." Murmurs erupted in the room. I raised a second page. "Here is a cease and desist order sent to your office. And here is a police report filed for trespassing." Clorinda's face was unreadable, but her knuckles were white on the edge of the podium. I kept going. "If anyone from this board steps onto my land again without a court order, I will press charges. And if you continue to harass me, I will sue you individually under civil code and tort law." Someone clapped in the back of the room. A woman near the aisle whispered, "It's about time." Clorinda tried to regain control. "Mr. Flint, we are within our rights to uphold community standards only within your jurisdiction," I interrupted. "Which ends at the eastern fence line. I suggest you stay on your side of it." I turned and walked out before she could respond. Outside, a man in a mechanic's jacket caught up with me in the parking lot. "Name's Ellis. I live 2 streets over. They tried to fine me for having a trailer in my own driveway. I fought him. 1-2, you need anything, photos, testimony, whatever, give me a shout." I shook his hand. "Appreciate it." As I drove home, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Several houses along the bluff had small signs in their windows. "Private property, not HOA land." The tide was turning. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to fight dirty. I just needed to keep shining the light. The rain hit sideways on Friday morning, the kind of sharp coastal storm that made the bluff feel like the edge of the world. I was watching the waves crash from the catwalk when I spotted movement near the lower ridge. 3 figures in plastic ponchos, crouched low and moving fast along the sea-bound fence line. I flicked the switch on the inside panel, and the floodlights lit up the slope like a stadium. They froze. I grabbed my binoculars. Not wildlife officers, not hikers. The one in front had a bolt cutter. I hit record on the external surveillance feed and stepped into my boots without bothering to tie them. By the time I reached the edge of the bluff, they were backing away, trying to look casual. One of them, a woman with a clipboard stuffed under her poncho, was already dialing her phone. "You cut my fence," I said, loud enough to carry over the wind. The man with the bolt cutter shifted his weight like he couldn't decide between apologizing or running. "No damage occurred," the woman said. "We were conducting an erosion risk assessment." "Then why sneak in during a storm? It's standard protocol to inspect during extreme conditions," she said without looking at me. I pointed to the sign half buried in the wet grass. "Private land. No trespassing. 24-hour surveillance." The third one, a younger guy with a laminated badge on a string around his neck, finally spoke. "We were told this bluff fell under Emergency Community Inspection Authority." "By who?" He hesitated. "The HOA Environmental Task Force." "The one that doesn't legally exist?" I asked. Silence. "Leave. Now." They didn't argue. I uploaded the footage to a secure drive, then called the sheriff's department and forwarded the video to Deputy Ramirez. She promised to escalate to county enforcement. That same afternoon, I received a call from the Coastal Commission's field office. They'd reviewed the footage and flagged the incident as a probable violation of state trespass law, with potential charges of impersonating environmental agents if the individuals weren't credentialed. I gave full statements. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. By Saturday evening, a black SUV pulled up just outside my gate. A man stepped out wearing a charcoal suit, no tie, hair slicked back like a courtroom actor. He walked with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. "You must be Mr. Flint," he said. "I'm Julian Morrow, legal counsel for the Bayshore Bluffs Homeowners Association, not interested in whatever you're selling." "Oh, I'm not selling. I'm here to deliver a formal notice." He held out a sealed manila envelope. "The HOA has filed a petition for conditional annexation of your parcel. They claim the bluff qualifies as an unregulated buffer zone under community safety ordinances." I opened the envelope on the spot. The petition was loaded with vague citations, misquoted statutes, and a laughable claim that my lighthouse posed a clear and present hazard due to unmonitored maritime interference. "Did Clarinder write this on a wine napkin?" He gave a thin, practiced smile. "You'll want to respond through counsel. If you fail to contest the petition within 10 days, the board may proceed with enforcement. You're bluffing." "Actually," he said, "we've already scheduled a preliminary hearing with the county magistrate." That stopped me for half a second. "Then I'll see you in court." As he turned to leave, he added, "Be aware, the board is authorized to seek reimbursement for the legal costs incurred by your noncompliance." I shut the gate behind him so hard the latch cracked. By Monday, I had my own attorney, Stellar Rojas, a former municipal prosecutor who now spent her days dismantling overreaching HOA boards like a surgeon with a grudge. She reviewed the petition and laughed so hard she had to set her coffee down. They're citing a shoreline buffer law that was repealed 6 years ago, and this clause here, maritime interference, that's not even a legal term. It's something they made up. "Can we countersue?" "Not yet," she said. "But we can file for injunctive relief and demand a formal investigation into their conduct, especially if they're misrepresenting legal authority." We filed that afternoon. The hearing was set for Thursday. It was supposed to be a procedural formality, just a magistrate reviewing the merits of their petition. I wore a clean shirt. Clarinda showed up with a lawyer, 2 board members, and a tall man I recognized as the HOA's new security consultant, the same one who'd measured my driveway earlier in the week. The magistrate, an older woman with a scratch in her voice and no patience for nonsense, flipped through the filings with visible irritation. "Mr. Morrow," she said, "you're asking the court to grant the HOA authority over land clearly marked as private based on statutes that no longer exist." "Your Honor," he began, "we believe the spirit of the law remains valid." She held up the petition. "This entire document is speculative. There's no precedent, no jurisdiction, and no evidence that the HOA holds any legal claim. Furthermore, I've received documentation from the county zoning office, the Coastal Commission, and the Sheriff's Department confirming Mr. Flint's property is exempt from HOA authority." Morrow tried to pivot, but she wasn't having it. "I'm dismissing this petition with prejudice," she said. "And I strongly advise your clients to cease any further action against Mr. Flint. Do I make myself clear?" Clarinda didn't speak. She just stared straight ahead, fists clenched around her chair. Outside the courthouse, Stella handed me a copy of the dismissal notice. "We've got enough now to open a civil harassment case. You want to go forward?" I nodded. "Let's hold them accountable." That night, someone drove past my house and lobbed a rock through my workshop window. They didn't get far. The license plate was caught on 3 security cameras, and the Sheriff's Department had the footage within the hour. The car was registered to a temporary board member's son. He confessed before midnight. Deputy Ramirez called me personally. "We're opening a criminal investigation into the HOA's leadership," she said. "Between the trespassing, impersonation, and now this, It's enough to get the DA involved." And they did. By the following week, subpoenas were issued. The HOA office was searched. Records were seized. It turned out the Environmental Task Force wasn't just unofficial, it was entirely fabricated. The board had created fake inspection forms, backdated letters, and even paid an unlicensed contractor to pose as a county inspector. The DA held a press conference. The Bayshore Bluffs HOA leadership is under investigation for coordinated fraud, harassment, and criminal misrepresentation. "We are pursuing charges." Clarinder resigned the next morning. So did half the board. I spent the rest of the week repairing my window and repainting the lighthouse's lower stairwell. Neighbors started stopping by, not just Ellis, but others I barely knew. A retired nurse brought pie. A couple with 2 toddlers offered to help repaint the fence. One man handed me a USB drive with photos of the HOA's black SUV parked where it shouldn't have been. "We're tired of them," he said. "You stood up. Now it's our turn." By the end of the month, a community meeting was called, not by the HOA, but by a group of residents who'd had enough. They voted to dissolve the board altogether. A temporary committee was formed to oversee only basic maintenance and trash collection. Everything else, voluntary. I kept the lighthouse lit every night, just like my grandfather had. Not because I had to, because now it meant something again. 2 weeks after the press conference, the wind had changed. Not just the coastal currents that swept in from the Pacific, but something quieter, deeper. The neighborhood, once tense and wary, had softened. Kids were riding bikes past my fence again. Someone had left a basket of lemons on my porch without a note. And though I hadn't asked for it, a group of residents had started repainting the old community bulletin board at the corner of Seaview and Garretson, the same one Clarinda had turned into her personal propaganda kiosk. Still, I wasn't naive enough to think the storm had passed completely. Not yet. Late one afternoon, I was finishing repairs on the lighthouse's weather-vane, an old brass gull that used to squeak in high winds, when my lawyer, Stella, called. Her voice was clipped and quiet. "They just filed a motion in district court," she said. "It's not from the HOA. It's from Julian Morrow personally." I climbed down the ladder. "He's acting on his own. Looks that way. He's alleging defamation, reputational damage, and interference with professional contracts. He's claiming you orchestrated a smear campaign during the investigation." I walked into the workshop and shut the door behind me. "He's trying to flip the fallout. He's trying to salvage his career. The state bar opened a review last week, so he's panicking, but don't worry, he's got no standing. We've already drafted a response and a request for dismissal." I leaned against the workbench. "What do we do if the judge lets it through?" "We counterfile, and this time we bring everything." She was right. I still had the footage of Morrow delivering that laughable annexation petition, the audio of his veiled threats, and the logs from the sheriff's department proving he coordinated with the fake Environmental Task Force. He'd hidden behind the HOA, but now that it had collapsed, he was exposed. No layers left to peel back. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. It wasn't held in the same local courthouse as before. This one was in the county's central district, a towering concrete building with metal detectors and elevators that groaned like old ships. Stella met me outside. She wore a gray coat and carried 2 leather folders. When we stepped into the courtroom, Morrow was already seated at the plaintiff's table alone. He didn't look like the same man. His suit was wrinkled. His hair was combed but not crisp. And when the judge entered, a tall woman with reading glasses and a habit of tapping her pen twice before speaking, he didn't rise with confidence. He rose like a man expecting the floor to give out. "Mr. Morrow," the judge began, "you filed a civil action alleging defamation, reputational interference, and loss of legal opportunities. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. Before we proceed, I've reviewed the preliminary exhibits, including the criminal investigation currently open under the district attorney's office regarding your alleged misconduct. Do you still wish to move forward?" Morrow cleared his throat but didn't speak immediately. I believe the events have been misconstrued. I acted under the authority granted to me by the board at the time, authority which, according to the state's findings, lacked legal basis and involved fabricated documentation. I was misled. Stella stood. Your Honor, we'd like to introduce a supplemental affidavit signed by a former HOA board member, confirming that Mr. Morrow personally drafted the annexation petition and coached the board on how to present it as enforceable law. The judge held out her hand. Stella passed her the file. Silence stretched for almost a full minute as the judge scanned the pages. Mr. Morrow, she said without looking up. This affidavit reveals deliberate misrepresentation of municipal and state law, which you, as a practicing attorney, should have recognized as invalid. Furthermore, the harassment campaign against Mr. Flint, documented by law enforcement and corroborated by multiple residents, shows a clear pattern of intimidation and abuse of legal authority. Morrow shifted in his chair. I was operating under pressure. You were not pressured, Mr. Morrow, you were complicit. This court is not your rehabilitation forum. She turned slightly. Motion denied. Mr. Flint, you are free to file for damages related to malicious prosecution. This case is closed. Back outside, Stella didn't say much. She just handed me a folder with the official order inside. It felt heavier than paper ought to. You've got the green light, she said. If you want to hit back, now's the time. But I didn't, not because I didn't want to, because I didn't need to. The next morning, I received a formal letter from the State Bar Association. Morrow's license had been suspended pending a full ethics review. 2 days later, the DA announced criminal charges for unlawful impersonation of a public official, conspiracy to commit fraud, and filing false legal instruments. He was taken into custody without incident. In the following weeks, the remnants of the old HOA board scattered. Some moved out quietly. Others vanished from community meetings altogether. The temporary resident committee held a vote to restructure everything. No more enforcement patrols. No more aesthetic citations. They kept basic maintenance and trash services, and everything else went to voluntary vote. I declined to join the committee, but I did agree to host the first open town gathering on my property. The bluff was cleared. The lighthouse's lower deck was strung with lanterns, and someone even brought a portable fire pit. Neighbors who had never spoken to each other stayed long after the sun dipped below the waterline. Ellis brought a long, folding table and laid out trays of sandwiches and potato salad. The retired nurse, her name was Carol, I learned volunteered to organize a neighborhood tool share. A couple who'd kept to themselves for years offered to teach a weekend class on solar panel installation. And one man, a quiet guy named Lewis who worked at the shipyard, stood near the edge of the bluff and said, "You know, I used to avoid this place. Thought the HOA would fine me just for looking at it too long. Feels different now." It did. In the days that followed, I removed the last of the no trespassing signs. Not because I expected trouble to disappear, but because I didn't want to live behind warnings anymore. One morning, I found a small envelope tucked under the old anchor at the edge of the path. Inside was a hand-drawn card, crayon on folded paper. On the front was a picture of the lighthouse, and inside, in blocky handwriting, "Thank you for keeping the light on." I framed it and hung it in the stairwell. There were still storms now and then. The wind still howled and the sea still tried to chew its way up the rocks. But the lighthouse stood, just as it always had, unshaken, unclaimed, and finally free.